Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I will be doing a breakdown and a review of Captain America Sentinel of Liberty number 2. This is the second issue of Captain America's ongoing series right now. So if you haven't watched my review of the first issue, go watch that first. Okay, now back to issue 2. Okay, so it starts off with Cap running. He's thinking about his problems with Bucky right now, that he hasn't answered him in 3 days. Cap is still reeling from his experiences in issue 1 and his fight with that mysterious new villain. Cap then jumps off into the water. Cap leaves a message for Bucky, asking him to talk with him, while he's super running across the city. Then, Cap gets a radio broadcast from his radio buddies. As Captain America continues to hyper run across New York City, Cap's radio buddies break down the new broadcast from the mysterious group called the Outer Circle. Cap's friends decipher the code, and they come into 5 distinct messages. One says power, NATO withdrawal from Simcaria border region, move 2. The next one says revolution, Jiangsu province, protest wave, move 9. Next, machine, secure the forge, move 11. Love, restorationism is in, Jean-Pierre Toulouse, move 6. Money, ECB interest rates down, market crisis point. T-minus 2 months, move 3. Cap and his friends don't know exactly what to make out of these deciphering broadcasts. Next, we see Cap hanging out with his art friends from his community college that he's attending. Cap can't get over what the villain that he took on in the first issue said to him about his shield. It's not your symbol, it's theirs. Next, we see Cap back at his gym, training the kid that he met when he moved back into his old apartment. Cap continues to teach the kid how to fight, and they get into a conversation about how you need to hit your enemy with all your force one time. While getting himself psyched up, he mentions something about a power station, the forge. Cap asks him what he's talking about, and the kid responds, telling Cap that his mom is an electrician, and a brand new power plant called the Forge came online last week in Germany. And this reminds Cap of one of the secret messages. Machine, secure the Forge, move 11. Cap heads over to the Forge power plant in Germany. Cap makes a huge jump up to the Forge and then goes in and investigates it. Cap's hunch was correct. He sees an elite squad of men holding the scientists hostage. And then Cap doesn't think very hard about what he has to do next. Cap hurls his shield at one of the agents, smashing his helmet open. Next, the soldiers try to open fire on the hostages. But Cap zips in front of the lasers protecting the hostages. And while defending them, Cap starts to take in the whole scene and pick up on the subtle details. He takes note that the soldiers refer to themselves as tithed agents. And while fighting them, he notices that one has a Hydra tattoo, and then he notices that they have hand techniques, and they also have aim armor, which is impact resistant. Cap absolutely lays waste to the soldiers, and while fighting them, they reveal their full forces, which include several mechs and way more soldiers, all coming at Captain America, armed to the teeth with hand ninja, Hydra weapons, and aim technology. Suddenly, Cap gets stabbed by one of them, and realizes that he's a man he knew, a man called Agent Ortiz from S.H.I.E.L.D. The knife, stained with Cap's blood, has a S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on it. The two explode into a deadly duel, spanning the power plant. Cap asks Agent Ortiz what he's doing with these people, and his only reply is, "I'm following orders." Cap goes on in continuous locked combat with Agent Ortiz, until the fight breaks out into the open. Cap takes on Agent Ortiz and the army at the same time, ultimately conquering both with relative ease. After Cap delivers the final blow to Agent Ortiz and is finished taking down the army, he takes a moment to take it all in, says that the fight cleared his head. But before he gets a chance to start wondering what exactly is going on here, he looks up in awe. And what he sees makes him think of one thing and one thing only. It's not your symbol. It's theirs. Cap looks up and sees a giant flying saucer that looks like his shield emerge from a mountain, blocking out the sun. Next, we see 5 mysterious personages, and each of their names line up with the 5 mysterious messages from the beginning of the issue. The first says, "Unexpected but not unwelcome. The machine motions to redact." The next person says, "The money seconds the motion." Next, "Power agrees too." The next person says, "Love abstains." And finally, Revolution says, "Who am I to stand in your way?" The Revolution votes yes. Then, a large hole opens up in the ship, and out of it, a pod comes speeding out and splits into pieces to reveal what looks like a giant speeding bullet. Cap sees it, squares up, and brandishes his shield in return, and says, "You want my shield?" The bullet speeds down and transforms into a giant metal rope. Cap stops it in midair, clashing with his vibranium shield, and he says, "Come and take it." This marks the end of Cap's portion of the comic. The next thing we see is Bucky, going on his own mission in Madripoor, where he goes to a high rollers game, where he confronts someone that he thinks is a part of this big conspiracy that Cap is working on, and is none other than Peggy Carter. Well, that's the end of the breakdown portion of this video. Now on to the review. I have to say, this series has been pretty exciting so far. One of the things that I'm most impressed with is how they really amped up the action in this series. I mean, having Cap casually take on an entire army by himself, including mechs, is pretty freaking exciting. And it's pretty refreshing to see, because in a lot of comic books that come out nowadays, they're just small bits of conversations and a little fight here and a little fight there. But with the way these writers are writing these new issues, they feel like a full experience that is worth waiting a month for. I also really enjoy how they display Captain America's powers. That because his body doesn't produce fatigue poisons, that's why he's not even tired after this long fight. And to him, it was just a good way to clear his head and his thoughts, which really shows his true power. This whole scene was just really well done. It also shows Cap's passive powers too. Because a lot of people often forget that the super soldier formula not only modified Cap's physical abilities, but his mental ones too. So while he's fighting, he's gathering information, processing it all rapidly, and putting it together, like noticing all these little details. Okay, so now we get to the villains that were introduced in this. This was definitely one of the coolest parts. So not only do they each have distinct names, money, power, love, revolution, and machine, but they also seem to represent different elements. I'll break down each one individually. Okay, so machine seems to be an old woman and represents Earth, which is kind of ironic because she's a machine, which is something that is unnatural. Now, one thing that's interesting is that while the others have generic symbols for their element, this one is specifically, obviously, an African landscape. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be significant to the story, or if this is just the artist's interpretation of a representation of Earth or something. Now, I have a memory of seeing an advertisement for these new villains for this new series, but I'm not sure if it's real or not. If anybody knows, please tell me in the comments section. So speaking of this villain, the Machine specifically, I have no idea who this person is. I don't know if they've already existed in Marvel or if they're brand new. Next up, we have this guy, the Money, with sun symbols behind him. So I think he clearly represents fire. Now, this dude is a member of a criminal organization and is called the Money and is huge, fat, and bald. So this has to be the Kingpin. Like, it literally can't be anyone else. Next up, we have Power, and he clearly represents water, as he has a bunch of sharks floating around him in a blue background. This guy is another obvious one. He's the Hood. He's not particularly a very popular Marvel villain, but he was significant during Brian Michael Bendis' run of Avengers. And if you don't know who he is, to make a long story short, he's a crime boss that is possessed by a demon and runs criminal organizations kind of like Kingpin. This next one, Love, is pretty interesting due to the fact that she doesn't seem to have an element behind her, just a pink stained glass background, because there's 5 people here and there's usually only 4 elements. I suppose she could possibly be metal, because in some cultures, wood and metal are elements too. I feel like I've seen this lady too before in a comic, but I don't know if I have. And finally, we have our guy, Revolution, who we met in the first issue. And he clearly represents air, as we can see the air blowing through the trees behind him. One thing is that he kind of looks like he has red hair, and he kind of looks like he has red hair in the first issue too, and he has a cane. He really reminds me of Arcade. And if you don't know who Arcade is, he's another very dangerous Marvel villain. I think he really does look like Revolution. And it would make sense considering that Kingpin and Hood are on this team, who are other Marvel villains that we already know. So overall, this organization is pretty cool and creepy, and I'm very excited to see what they do with them. I especially like the twist that they're the ones who were behind Cap's shield and its creation, and that the rings of the shield and the shape of the star have something to do with the way they play their Sentry game, as we saw in issue 1. So them having a giant spaceship that looks like Cap's shield is pretty cool and intimidating. So the only thing that I have to say that is negative about this comic is that there's 2 scenes where I think Cap has out-of-character dialogue. Cap says, "You're the only man I've ever met who enjoyed punching Nazis more than me." This dialogue is odd to me, especially when you compare it to the first issue, where they totally nailed Steve Rogers. But this one, it takes away his purity. Cap didn't fight in World War II because he enjoyed punching Nazis. He did it because he enjoyed protecting people and doing the right thing. And then here, in this scene, the kid marvels at Cap breaking the bag. And then Cap says, "That's nothing, you should see Hitler." And well, yes, the very first cover of the very first Captain America issue ever, he is punching Hitler in the face. It doesn't seem like something Captain America would say. Because if you've ever read a Captain America comic, you would know that Steve is a very humble person. And the only time he really gets mad is if he's in battle and innocent people are in harm's way. He wouldn't sit there and brag about hurting someone, even someone as bad as Hitler. I really hope we don't have to deal with any more dialogue like this in the future. I mean, maybe it's because there's 2 different writers writing this, and maybe that's why there's an inconsistency between the first and the second issue in dialogue, but it's a really small thing, and it probably won't come up again. I really hope so, anyway. But, of course, my main problem with this series is that it takes a freaking month for it to come out. I'm really looking forward to the new issue, and if you guys like this series, I recommend you guys buy it too. The 3rd issue comes out next month. And I also thought I'd do a breakdown of this scene here. So at the beginning, Cap jumps off of the Statue of Liberty and into the water. But in the comic, it makes it seem like the water is closer to the statue. But in real life, if you look at pictures of it, it's like almost 300 feet away from the statue to the water. And in the comic, it looks like he jumps straight down. So if they're going for accuracy, it doesn't really make any sense. So either in the Marvel Universe, Liberty Island is much smaller, or Cap hit the ground first and then jumped in the water. Either way, it's a pretty cool display of his powers. It reminds me of this other issue where Cap jumps out of a plane that's 200 feet in the air and falls down and crushes a car and is A-okay with no pain at all. But the Statue of Liberty is an even better feat because it's 305 feet tall with the stand and everything. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Next month, I'll be making a review for the 3rd issue.